$4 here, $6 there, $9.99 that looks harmless enough to ignore. That's how it usually starts. Not with a big decision, but with a shrug. I'll admit it plainly. A free trial renewed on me once, without any drama at all. No warning bells, no email I remember reading, just a quiet charge that blended into the rest of the month like it had always been there. That's the trick of it. These aren't purchases in the old sense, they're meters. And the meter runs on its own. For most of our lives, payment was an event. You paid once on purpose and then you were done. You wrote a check. You handed over a card. There was a moment where money changed hands and you noticed. Subscriptions existed, but they were visible. A magazine showed up in the mailbox. A bill arrived. You knew what you were paying for because it arrived physically. That shifted as soon as software moved onto phones and televisions, became platforms instead of boxes. The price dropped, the commitment stretched out, and the payment faded into the background. $4 a month doesn't feel like a decision. It feels like a rounding error. And when the app asks for your card just to start the trial, it feels procedural, not contractual. That's where the pressure creeps in. Free for 7 days, cancel anytime, full access right now. The language is casual, the button is friendly. What's missing is the moment where you pause and think, I am agreeing to something ongoing. Because the design doesn't want that pause, it wants momentum. And then there's the quiet part afterward. The charge posts weeks later. Not large enough to trigger concern, not labeled clearly enough to ring a bell. It might say the platform name, or it might say something vague that sounds like infrastructure. You see it, you assume you authorized it, and you move on. That's not carelessness, that's modern billing working as intended. Streaming made this worse by stacking subscriptions inside subscriptions. You sign up for one service, then add a channel inside it. That channel has its own trial, its own renewal date, its own line item. A bundle starts to look like savings, even when it overlaps with something you already pay for elsewhere. The math gets fuzzy, the interface stays cheerful. Utility apps picked it up next. Flashlights, scanners, note tools, photo editors. Things that used to cost a few dollars once now cost a few dollars forever. Annual plans slide in quietly because monthly feels irritating. You don't remember agreeing to a year, you just remember wanting the feature that suppresses ads. None of this requires bad intentions. It relies on habit and distraction, on the fact that most people don't audit their statements line by line, on the fact that small numbers don't feel urgent, on the fact that cancellation is never where you signed up. The result isn't ruin, it's a low-grade sense of lost time, a feeling that money is leaving without asking permission anymore. So the question becomes practical, not moral. Where exactly do these charges hide? And why are they so hard to shake once they settle in? That's what's worth pulling apart, calmly, one screen at a time. By the time people notice something's off, the confusion has already done its work. A charge looks familiar enough to pass inspection, but vague enough to avoid recall. That's not an accident. It's the result of a few design choices that repeat across apps, streaming, platforms, and services that used to cost one flat fee. Those choices didn't appear randomly. They were tested, refined, and repeated because they worked quietly and consistently, without requiring attention, outrage, or active participation from the people being billed. The first move is card-first access. The free trial asks for payment details up front, framed as a formality. "We won't charge you yet" is technically true, but irrelevant. What matters is that the billing relationship is already established before you've decided whether the thing is worth keeping. The clock starts immediately, whether you use the service or forget about it entirely. Time becomes the deciding factor, not satisfaction. If you remember, you cancel. If you don't, the system proceeds calmly, as designed, without reminders that feel urgent or personal. Then there's auto-renew by default. Nothing dramatic, just a small line of text under the button you wanted to press anyway. Renewal isn't presented as a choice you make later. It's treated as the natural continuation of the trial, not a new agreement. Canceling becomes an interruption, not a decision. The system assumes yes unless told otherwise. That assumption carries weight. It shifts responsibility onto memory and follow-through, two things modern interfaces know are unreliable when everything else competes for attention. Finding the cancel button is the next layer. It's rarely where you signed up. It's tucked behind account settings, then subscriptions, then something called manage, which sounds administrative enough to discourage curiosity. 3 taps isn't a lot technically. Psychologically, it's plenty. Each extra step gives you a reason to postpone. Promo pricing does the rest. A service costs $4 for the first month, then quietly becomes $12. The jump isn't hidden, but it's not emphasized either. The initial price anchors your perception. When it increases, it doesn't feel like a new decision. It feels like friction you don't quite have time to deal with. Streaming platforms add complexity by stacking services inside services. You sign up for one, then add channels within it, each with its own trial and renewal date. The bundle looks efficient, even when it duplicates something you already pay for elsewhere. The interface stays upbeat. The math does not. This is where the comparison to old cable packages or mail-order clubs fits. Same structure, cleaner screen, faster decisions, easier forgetting. Utility apps picked up the pattern quickly. Flashlights, scanners, photo editors, note tools. Things that once cost a few dollars now cost a few dollars every month or year. Annual plans slide in quietly because monthly feels annoying and slightly harder to justify. None of this requires bad intent. It relies on habit, distraction, and the fact that most people don't audit statements line by line. Small numbers don't feel urgent. Cancellation is rarely where you started. Once you see the mechanics, the system doesn't vanish. It becomes legible. By this point, it's tempting to say the world has gotten noisier, sneakier, more aggressive about money. That's partly true, but there's another angle that's less dramatic and more useful. The systems didn't suddenly go wild. We just stopped updating how we deal with them. Most of these subscription traps work because they rely on habits that used to make sense. Pay once, own it. Try something briefly, then decide. Assume silence means nothing is happening. Those rules held for a long time. The interfaces changed. The expectations didn't. That gap is where charges live. So instead of treating this like a battle, it helps to treat it like maintenance. Not a purge, not a cleanse, just a short check that fits how things work now. The kind you can do calmly, without caffeine, resolve, or the sense that you're fixing something broken. Here's the practical version. Before starting anything with a trial, decide in advance whether you'd keep it at full price. Not the intro price, the real one. If the answer is no, that's fine. Just don't pretend you'll evaluate later, because later is designed to slip past unnoticed. Then there's use, not intention, not hope, actual use. If an app hasn't been opened in months, it's not quietly waiting to become essential. It's billing on schedule. That isn't a moral failure or laziness. It's a predictable outcome of how subscription systems are designed. Next is duplication, where streaming gets slippery. You subscribe to one service, then add channels inside it, then forget you already pay for those channels somewhere else. The interface feels consolidated. The charges remain separate. The screen looks efficient. The statement tells the truth every single month. Price jumps matter too. Many services start small on purpose. $4 feels like nothing. 12 feels like something to deal with later. Except later never arrives because the increase doesn't come with a decision point. It just appears quietly and settles in as the new normal. Then there's timing. Decide before the trial starts. Not during, not on day 6 when a reminder pops up between errands. If you decide early, the clock stops being a weapon. It becomes irrelevant because the system no longer gets to use time against your attention. None of this requires technical skill or suspicion. It only requires matching attention to how the system actually behaves. These designs don't rely on people being foolish or careless. They rely on people being busy, distracted, and willing to postpone small decisions until later. There's also a quiet social layer to this. Nobody brags about canceling subscriptions. Nobody jokes about their spreadsheet. The default response is a shrug, and it's only a few dollars. Multiply that by enough services, and it stops being funny, but still avoids feeling urgent. And yes, we've handled worse transitions. We learned dial-up without instruction manuals. We adapted to pop-ups, toolbars, and software that arrived uninvited. This is another version of that adjustment. Less noisy, more patient. It asks for awareness, not outrage or constant vigilance. Once you see it clearly, the irritation fades. The world doesn't feel hostile. It feels organized around forgetting. Lists help. Early decisions help. Calm attention helps, not perfectly. Just enough to stay oriented, without feeling chased by every small charge that slips onto a statement.